persecution. Many were suffering trials, and sometimes when we're going through, we don't always love others the way that we should, and that's because we're just so focused on our own pain. But it's at times like this that the church has to surround the brother or the sister with Christ-like love and pray them and love them through their pain. So brotherly love is very important. In verse 2 he says, "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." Another way that we show the love of Christ is in showing hospitality to others. As Christians, we are to be welcoming and hospitable. Paul was encouraging these believers to open up their hearts and their homes. They were to entertain strangers. During these times, there were no hotels as we know them today. They did have some inns that served some kind of purpose like that, but they were often unsavory and unsafe places to stay in. Traveling in those days was difficult and it was often dangerous. Therefore, Christians were encouraged to take people into their own homes. Today we are much more private, and we do not really open our homes to strangers very often. Some of us don't even open up our homes to our other family members. But hospitality is a part of our calling as Christians. One of the best ways to show people the character of Christ is to open up your doors to them. Invite them in for coffee, a meal, or a Bible study. Let them see that your faith is not just something that you talk about, but that it's a real part of your life. I grew up in England, and we are what they call first generation Black British. My parents went to England in the late 40s and early 50s. And at that time, there was a lot of racism. There was still racism now, but at that time it was more pronounced. So it was very difficult for Black people to find a place to live. White people would not rent to them, and often the only way they could find a lodging was to stay with another Black person, preferably one who had their own home. And for that reason, as I grew up, we always had people staying with us. Our doors were always open. It was almost like a revolving door. It was just like one big, happy family. And that's the environment that I grew up in. And many of the people around us did the same thing. And my understanding is that in the migration from the south to the north, it was the same thing here in the United States. As people relocated, they went to homes and relatives and friends in the northern states like Chicago or New York, and they found a warm welcome. And when you look at it, our communities were so much stronger and so much more united at that time than they are today. I think we need to rekindle this quality. Hospitality is a great quality. I mean, that is the character of God, who is loving, warm, open, and welcoming. Hospitality is also a very important quality to be required of Christian leaders. If you want to build up the house of God, then show a hospitable spirit. Be warm, be welcoming to people, and give them a reason to feel good about coming back. You said here that some may be entertaining angels unawares. And this is very true. And in this case, we are referring to the hospitality of Abraham when he entertained the two heavenly visitors. When you think about it, we do not always know why God will send certain people our way. God may send some for a reason and some for a season. But either way, we are to be welcoming and warm. And sometimes I know my own self. I've been on the receiving end of it. God has just assigned a certain person for a certain time and a certain place, where I might have been in trouble or where I might have needed help. and God sent somebody who I didn't know, or someone who just happened to be there right in the nick of time. That was an angel with human flesh on. So, we have to be warm, we have to be open, we have to be welcoming. You don't want to send away someone that God might be sending to you. And also, God might assign us to certain people and certain places. And we want to be willing vessels so that we can be used by Him. Remember them that are in bonds, as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity, as being yourselves also in the body. At the time of writing, some of the Hebrew believers had been afflicted and were on trial, or had been imprisoned for their faith. To remember them meant that believers were to provide practical assistance by providing meals and other necessities for those who were imprisoned, due to the fact that under the Roman authorities, prisoners were not well fed or cared for. They didn't have the sort of prison social, warehousing, hotel kind of system that we have today. I mean, when you did time there, you definitely did time. And it says, as being yourselves also in the body. They were to show empathy, because some of them had already suffered afflictions. Some of them had been imprisoned or would soon be imprisoned. So they had to show compassion and empathy. And that teaches us today that we too are to show compassion, even towards the incarcerated. Many incarcerated people have come to faith in Christ while in prison. And some people, just literally, they just blew it. And they did something wrong and they ended up doing the time. But they're still Christians. So they need to be ministered to, they need to be encouraged, and they need to be restored. So let's go on to the next part of the next caption, which says love and spiritual gifts. And it expands on love. I mean, the first 3 verses that we read from Hebrews are really just our loving actions towards our neighbors or to those who might be in a fix and need a little help. As we go on to our text in 1 Corinthians, Paul is going to expand on his teaching about spiritual gifts. The fascination with spiritual gifts is nothing new. We're always drawn to the dramatic, the spectacular, and to things that have the appearance of being miraculous or supernatural. Spiritual gifts are real. And while we often spend a lot of time discussing the more visible or showy gifts, such as tongues and prophecy, the truth of the matter is that no church can function without some of the other gifts that rarely get a mention. We fixate ourselves on tongues or on miracles, but also needed are those who know how to function in administration, so that the church will run smoothly. And regardless of how gifted or supernatural our services may be, if the church isn't clean or the light bill hasn't been paid, then there won't be a place to display those gifts in. However, after Paul described the gifts in chapter 12, he ended by saying that there is a more excellent way. That's in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 31. And that excellent way is the way of love, which has a much higher priority and place than any of the gifts in the plan and program of God. So love is the more excellent way. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. The Corinthian church, like many of our churches today, were fixated on the gifts. And there was a special fascination with the gift of tongues. Yet in spite of all this giftedness, the Corinthian church was plagued with problems, one of which was that there was an absence of love among the members. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, going on in this, the debate continues, and there are different views, but speaking with the tongues of men and angels is referring, to supernatural utterances and tongues. And we ask ourselves, are these tongues real and actual languages? or